Okay, it seems to be going. Hello, everyone. This is Margaret Arney from Tosa Together, and I am delighted to be with you for yet another Tosa Talks, Building a Diverse and Thriving Community. And we are proudly sponsored by our generous friends at Bostic. Tosa Together features 3 monthly presentations that provide meaningful discussion around racial and social justice issues and support the work of building an inclusive anti-racist community. Tonight's presentation, we feature a discussion about the past, present, and future of the Oneida Nation in Wisconsin with our guest, Dr. Mark Powless. As always, your comments and questions are welcome. Please use the Facebook comment section to add your voice to the conversation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's Katie Phillips. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm happy to be here tonight with our special guest, Dr. Mark Powless. Dr. Powless works in different segments of the community, including elementary education. His background as a clinical psychologist, university lecturer, and educational consultant have brought mental health support and awareness of Native issues to many communities around the state. He is a member of the Oneida Nation. Mark, welcome to Tosa Talks.
Seguli swagwek, what the gonawelat, igale that one lanha, the halawakashus nugets ngweneha, wagwahoni wagadaloda, and kole oni gori aga, ni wagadu one joke. Negune wagat sanuni, G wakagweni, wagadadiate wene ginu, yungwela stakwa. Ne okne, yotanunya G, agagweni, ahridiline, a kind of one slio, one slade, ne one slit dani. So I just want to say a few words in Oneida language. Very happy to be able to be here. Of course, greeting everybody that I can see and all the folks that I can't see. So very happy that each and every one of you has been able to be here or listened in on our talk tonight. My name is Tehala Wakashus, also obviously go by Mark Powless. I'm Wolf Clan, and as already mentioned, I'm a member of the Oneida Nation. So I noticed in the title that it's something about Oneida Nation. Of course, I don't speak for the whole nation, so I'm just going to do my best to hold up my part of what I'm able to talk about here tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so we appreciate this perspective, knowing that no one person is going to represent their nation as a whole, but we really appreciate your time. So could you start with giving us some context for a little bit of history, the things that folks in Tosa and really in Wisconsin should know about Indigenous history and especially your community?
Sure. So I heard we only have an hour, so I'll just try to give some brief information. I know there are some resources in the chat. There'll be more resources available in the chat likely. To me, knowing that whatever you might find in a book or a web page, obviously things are taken with a grain of salt, and there's some things that are much better than other things. I think the more you engage with information, the more likely you are to be able to make up your own minds as to what really fits and makes sense and what doesn't. And also, attending talks where folks are doing their best to give you authentic information is probably a good way to learn some things. So again, happy and excited to be able to be here. So if we kind of look at the history, I suppose, my teachers would have mentioned, any story needs to start at the beginning, which goes back a long ways in for my creation story into a realm that wasn't really part of the earth at that time. I'm not going to go back that far because that would take all day as well. But suffice it to say that prior to contact by Europeans on the continent here, there are various estimates based on archaeological records and whatnot of how many people were here, how many distinct nations were here, how many kind of confederacies were here. So folks that kind of hung together but weren't necessarily the same nation. And it's quite a big number. And that's the number that I've researched the most and kind of found, and it's more in the tens of millions of people that were here, at least 1,000 or maybe 2,000 different nations that were here. with almost just as many languages that were being spoken at that time prior to contact. So no one really knows, right? It wasn't written down. We don't have that kind of a record put together that way. I shouldn't say nobody knows, because the oral history is also very strong, and it is a way of knowing some things. But as far as recorded history is written, that wasn't that way. But a lot of other evidence so that this continent was pretty well inhabited. So when the Europeans came, amongst the different things they brought, and some of it were diseases that we didn't have much of or any immune system to. So there's written records from the exploring parties that came through that found areas that were just decimated and filled with bones. So that disease proceeded the people from coming as they made their way from east to west across the continent, and would wipe out whole communities, or most of the communities. People would have to scatter and go live somewhere else, live with some of their neighbors. And it always kind of struck me that these written records talk about all these bones. So the people had been deceased for some time, I would think. It wasn't like, hey, just, we got here and a week ago people had dropped, but it had been some time before that. So there's some versions of it that, because I guess we look into the mythology of America and think about this untamed wilderness and all these animals that roamed all over, and the skies were blackened by birds. And I don't doubt there was some of that, but I also have checked into the record and talked with other folks from around the country, and there were a lot of efforts for indigenous people of really managing and manicuring their environment, keeping the animal populations in a good balance with crops, and a lot of us were farmers or hunters, some hunters and gatherers more nomadic, but lots of folks really had established territories back at that time. So kind of taking a look at that, and I guess and fast forwarding to time in the about the early 1800s, they did an actual census, went around and counted, as accurate as censuses are, but they came up with a number of American Indians living within the boundaries of the United States of about 250,000. So whether there were 1 million or 100 million people here prior, that's still a lot of decimation. So these days we have about 577, I think, federally recognized distinct nations, recognized by the U.S. federal government, and we still have about somewhere between 100 and 200 distinct languages that are continuing to be spoken. I would say every language is in some state of revitalization. So it's been very difficult to keep our cultural ways and our languages really alive and thriving, given the history since contact and since the colonization, more direct colonization era. So it was quite a while that American Indians fell underneath the Department of War, right? The Europeans, and then the U.S. government, when it started after the Revolutionary War, saw the Indians as a problem. That's quite well written about, the Indian problem. And the initial way was to go to war and get rid of us, and then that wasn't it wasn't humane, I suppose, and wasn't all that effective necessarily. So it really turned into assimilation. So we have quite a history of being more or less forcibly assimilated into, I guess, mainstream American European culture and religion. So our ways of doing things were outlawed for, I would say, pretty close to 100 years. So 3-4 generations, depending how you count that, people who were not allowed to practice ceremonies, practice dances, speak languages, things like that. It's really amazing, and I think miraculous, and a real testament to resiliency of not just the Native people, but all people, to be able to continue on with the ways you're instructed as far as your origin story tells you how to live your life and what's really a priority and really important. So we continue to be able to find people that can speak our languages and to teach our languages and to hold our ceremonies. We can pass those down to our children, grandchildren, upcoming generations, other folks. I mean, I'd like to teach as much Oneida as I know whenever I get an opportunity. So I think that's a testament to the people who had taught me, that it's a similar kind of a spirit that's going to continue on, really, no matter what, to be able to make sure that our ways continue and they persist. So, but given all that diversity of all the different nations, there are some things that are quite different amongst us. And I do presentations now and again, and I get asked to, say something in Indian, or tell me something about Indians, as if there's maybe one or two kinds of Indians, I suppose. So some of this talk is hopefully we can understand that there's hundreds of ways of doing things just within the boundaries of the United States, let alone Canada and Latin America and South America and whatnot. But in there are some similarities and there are lots of differences. Some of us understand the energy of this life going in a clockwise manner. Some of us understand it going in a counterclockwise manner. So we have some fundamental differences like that. Some of us are matrilineal, some of us are patrilineal. Different, different foundational understanding of how the world or how cosmology operates. In our languages, some of our languages are so distant from each other that they're unrecognizable to each other.
Mhm.
So, and some are similar, of course, and some of us have some common things. And I would think creation stories I've heard, I have not heard them all by any means, but all the ones that I've run across, right? There's a creator that's created things, not dissimilar to other creation stories that are around the globe. And we are one thing that was created. So, in my understanding, we have that relationship with other things that were created, that mutual respect for things. So I used to hear that too. Oh, you guys worship trees, or you guys worship this or that. And that's not really the case. You see that in the movies, or you maybe see it in a book, or it's a myth that's been passed on from wherever. But it's not about that. It's about this understanding and respect that tree was created with the spirit, and it has a job and a responsibility, as do we, and we intersect sometimes. And we all know trees help us to have oxygen, and so we have some reciprocity to help that tree out as much as we can as well. And in the Oneida creation story talks about that the creator created everything on the earth, and things that spiritual forces, greater forces, like the rains or the winds, those kinds of things were already here, and agreements were established for the benefit of the people. And the creator had a big meeting, and invited everything in creation to come. And I don't know how it went. I'm old, but not that old, so I don't really know what it sounded like. But in my head, it's like the creator said, geez, I'm glad everybody came, but I apologize. I'm going to make this one last creation. And it's the most pitiful creation that I've ever made. And it's going to rely on all of you to take care of it. So everything in creation made an agreement that it would help to make sure that we were able to live the life as intended. And for us, the life as intended is a life that we can have peaceful thoughts and feelings. We can go about, right? It's an abundance mindset. Everything is already provided for us. Anything we need, if we're walking on our path in life, we can pick it up as we need it. And if we don't need it, we can put it back down and keep moving on. And to me, it's really true. I mean, I live here, I have a job, I got bills, all those things that seem impossible some days, but at the foundation, everything I need really is provided all around me. As much as I stay in tune with that. And again, I'm not in tune every day, but I work on it every day to be there, to be in line with those things. So all the nations have creation stories, things that guide them, give you, I guess they call them original instructions, how you're supposed to live your life, how you are to be in peace with yourself, harmonious with everything else around us. Knowing that we don't have an ideal life in this world. That's not really what this life is about. So there's going to be bumps and scrapes and rubbing up against things and whatnot. And those are a lot of our songs and ceremonies and speeches, and within our language are ways to deal with those things, ways to continue on our path in life, even when we get knocked off or knocked down or tragedy happens. There's still ways to kind of pick up and continue on and be part of your community and part of all of creation and part of that cosmology, the greater forces that are around here as well. And so it is, I guess I would say, a friend of mine has come to do some talks and inserts these fun facts here and there. So a fun fact I think that people around this area would want to know about is there are a number of American Indian nations within the state of Wisconsin. And there are 12 of them, as a matter of fact, 11 federally recognized and one that was federally recognized, but had lost the recognition along the way and are continuing to work to regain that recognition. Because they're also a sovereign, they're recognized as a sovereign nation, and a lot of us still recognize them as a sovereign nation. So the state of Wisconsin has the most American Indian nations in it east of the Mississippi River.
Wow.
Which is really, I guess, kind of astounding. You think that all the eastern states, all them states, that's a lot of territory east of the Mississippi. And that's, of the state to have 11 recognized and a 12th one in there as well. To me, it always kind of catches me like, holy cow, what's that all about? But there were laws on the books back then that wanted all the Native folks moved west of the Mississippi. It was pretty effective, so it kind of moved lots of folks over. So, but here we have, like I'm Oneida, we actually are from out east, what's now upstate New York, Lower Canada, Pennsylvania area. We got moved over here in the 1820s. Some of the other nations out east moved with us or came around that similar time, or have migration stories where they were here and left and came back. The Ho Chunk Nation's origin story actually begins around Green Bay, and the Menominee Nation, their origin story starts in what's now Upper Michigan. So these are their original homelands, and Potawatomis have been here, migration stories back and forth for a long time. So you notice like the city names and river names and whatnot in the state of Wisconsin have this different kind of a sound, but most of them are based on Menominee or Potawatomi or Ojibwe words. So a lot of the stuff that we, I guess, take for granted is actually native language for things that were of those places at that time. So sometimes I say a lot of words and I'm not sure if I answered the question, but I want to.
No, I think that's a fabulous summary of the things that we can kind of get into in more depth as we now talk about the present day versus things that and misconceptions that people might still have from history class or from media. So those are all awesome things to talk about.
The only other thing I'd want to add, just thinking of it now, is Milwaukee itself, right? A lot of folks can trace that word to something like Minnewaukee, the good land. It's an Ojibwe Potawatomi term that's what it means. And you look at even the archaeological evidence around here and the oral histories and things like that, and it's recognized as always been a confluence of a meeting place with the rivers here, and the lake here, a traveling place, and really more of a cosmopolitan place over the years. And it still is. Milwaukee is still a great port city, and lots of stuff happening here, a lot of diversity. So another fun fact, I suppose. Yes.
And we were taught here in Wauwatosa that Wauwatosa means firefly. So, but I honestly don't know which language that came from. So I'd have to go look that up. Awesome. So when you mentioned the sovereign nations, the 12 in Wisconsin, can you talk a little bit more about what that means for an Oneida Nation member to be a member of a sovereign nation? Just like how does that affect everyday life or their identity or
that's a great question, and there's a lot of different directions I think that answer could go in. So I always do my best. So I'll do my best to kind of answer that. So there was a time when anybody born in the Oneida Nation to Oneida parents it would never been a question of citizenship, I suppose. It's kind of the practices and beliefs that people followed, languages they spoke, whatnot. So it was that way for a long time. I said even in the census in the early 1800s, they kind of looked at where people lived and classified them that way. There were mistakes in the census. Kind of just everyone who lived in that area was considered Oneida or Ottawa or whichever nation was primary there. And it was more in the 1920s, 1924, there was an act that was passed from Congress, the Snyder Act, that conveyed U.S. citizenship onto all American Indians that were then born. And not every state adopted it right away, or I should say implemented it right away. But by the 1940s, everybody was using that. So then I've been born since that time. So automatically born as a dual citizen. So, born in a hospital, automatically get a birth certificate, recognized by the state of Wisconsin, the county I was born in, the United States, and all the benefits conveyed through that. But also I'm a member of the Oneida Nation. And I think that sovereignty can be a little bit tricky. It's often, like in the legal history, it's looked at as a limited sovereignty, which I think is an oxymoron, right? If you're sovereign, that's what it means. It means you can do what you want, make your own decisions, you're self-sufficient, self-governing. Nobody can really take that away from you. It's a right of yours. Of course, we do see wars that happen, treaties that are made, even more in modern times, world wars, things like that, where the victor of the military campaign can kind of set some limits on what somebody can do and can't do. And that's a lot of that's what happened with our American Indian nations. Is there was a time when obviously we were the most people here, right? And then that changed over time, got moved to smaller and smaller pieces of land in different areas, and lost a lot of that ability to control ourselves. So for us in Oneida, at one point we had like a 6 million acre territory where we would move about. There was 9 main families that move about the territory, depending on when we needed to rotate our fields or where the game was in seasons. And if it was a drought, you can move to an area that had more water. If it was a rainy time, you can move someplace that had less rain. It's a lot of space to be able to do that, which I think is a really good example of being sovereign. You can decide where you're going to go, when you need to go there, and really take care of your populace. So that's how that was. And that got shrunk down through treaties and different agreements, some on the up and up, some not so much. A long history of things like that, but that got down to about 250,000 acres at one time. And they said, well, you guys can move west to Mississippi or you can stay here. And we thought, well, that's enough. We can still farm and hunt and sustain ourselves and have our government and our ceremonies and all that stuff. And that was good. So that just kept getting chewed away and shrunk down. At one point, it got down to 32 acres. Well, you can't really run a nation on 32 acres. So I think a lot of the treaties and the being moved from your area that the creator placed you on to a different area has to do with like a rock and a hard place metaphor. So when you finally get shrunk down enough, well, we can't even feed ourselves. If you can't feed yourselves, you're not really sovereign. You're reliant on someone else to take care of you. So we always work to rebuild that sovereignty, to once again fully regain that government to government relationship. So it is even here in the state of Wisconsin, we have a government to government relationship with the U.S. federal government. We were moved here in the 1820s. Wisconsin didn't become a state till the 1840s. And so our agreement, that relationship predates Wisconsin. So we have certain sovereign rights that are upheld at the federal level that we don't need to comply with at the state level. We're often working to be good neighbors and be in good agreement, but the state can't really enforce things on the Oneida Nation because it's not a nation to state level, it's a nation to nation level of agreement. But again, I mean, case, Supreme Court level and whatnot has put a limit on some of those things, recognizing that, we're surrounded by the United States, and through our land cessations to live on smaller reservations, the United States had made a payment for that. So, hey, we're going to take your 6 million acres away. We're going to give you some beef, we're going to give you some cloth, give you some heating oil, some things like that. And it's a long history of those agreements not being upheld, but it was that agreement on a nation to nation level. So I guess similar to here, if I were to want to buy my neighbor's house, I would offer them, a fair price, and I would own their house. That they couldn't come back there, or I could rent it to them, or, something like that. But they would have the ability to say, I'm not selling in my house. No, I'm, got your own house. So I think it kind of gets a little bit tricky because of that legal history of limiting our sovereignty. And at some point back in the 1820s and 30s with John Marshall in the Supreme Court, talks about being domestic dependents. And actually, probably 40 years after that, Congress had taken an act to no longer allow treaties that the executive branch could write and agree to, and that became a power of Congress. And so Congress has the ability to then, make those all null and void if it wanted to. I have a theory of why they don't do that. I really think that the fledgling United States needed to exert its sovereignty, and one way to be sovereign is to make agreements with another sovereign entity. So they made all kinds of agreements with us, acknowledging that we're sovereign. And then over the course of different points in history, they try to pull back on that, but I don't know how that plays out in long term, because if you've said you're 100% sovereign, so I'm making agreement proving that I'm sovereign, and then I'm going to say, oh, you're not sovereign, like my foundational argument kind of goes away, I think. But that's for other people to figure out, not for me. But it's kind of a long roundabout way to talk about those rights as being a citizen of a sovereign nation, right? It'd be just like being a U.S. citizen. Somebody couldn't come and say, oh, you're no longer U.S., now you're something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it helps a lot to think about nation to nation is the relationship, but when agreements are made, and so that's not the state to nation, it's nation to nation. So that helps clarify it for me. Yeah. Going off, since we're talking about treaties, there are rights that have been established with the treaty rights that the nations have. Those are, so I'm referring to maybe hunting and fishing, or the land itself and how that land is managed. How does, are there some things we should know about that in Wisconsin? How do there seem like, when I read the paper, I read some interactions between state agencies and nations. So can you talk about treaty rights a little bit?
Sure, I think that's a great question. That's also very pertinent in Wisconsin kind of a question. Anybody who was, I guess, living especially in northern Wisconsin in the 70s and later 80s and even into the early 90s, and I suppose even now we have things come up that continue to go on. So some of it is with the treaty rights, right? When the federal government wanted some land, whatever that it was, for the timber or for whatever resources, or just wanted us moved, or there weren't as many of us, so whatever that their justification was at the time. Sometimes in those treaties, it would say, well, you need to move to this certain area and stay within those boundaries. And you can still run your nation and ceremonies and all that stuff, and then we'll supplement some food because you can no longer go and hunt or whatever it is that you might need, whatever that payment is for all that property that was given up. But it also was in some of the treaties, especially here in Wisconsin and the Chippewa bands in northern Wisconsin, about the northern third of the state, I suppose, there are rights that were retained within those ceded territories.
Mm-hmm.
For those nations, that was part of their territory up into Minnesota, Canada, and whatnot all over, but just pertaining to Wisconsin, it's about the upper third of the state. And within there are retained rights within that territory that was agreed to give it up, or it was ceded, CEDED, over to the United States. And for a long time, partly because your large population becomes a small population, and all the other pressures to conform and not rile up any of your neighbors who might make your life more difficult, so to say. Those rights weren't practiced, and there were a couple brothers back actually in the early 70s that started learning about these things. They went to school and they learned about a treaty and treaties, and they actually got a copy of their treaty. And in it talked about having the right to hunt, fish, and gather within that ceded territory. So they can really go anywhere in that part of the state and go hunt, fish, and gather. And at the time, fishing was big for them, because that's how we fed our families. Hunting, you didn't really have enough land to go out and hunt many places, but within the lakes, you could still go and fish. And there's some lakes up there where the reservation boundaries go right through the middle of the lake. And if you were caught fishing on the other side of it, you'd get a ticket. Maybe they'd confiscate your boat or whatever. So they went out and they told the DNR, hey, we're going to go fishing on that side of the lake. Just give you guys a heads up what's going on. They want to do a test case in the courts. So they went out, they got tickets, whatnot, and then they started from there and went all the way through. And in some ways, I don't know if it's culmination is the right word, but in some ways it culminated in what they termed the Walleye Wars up north. A lot of the local towns and local sports fishermen and all the bars and resorts that rely on that tourism, those tourism dollars, were very much afraid, and I think really fanned the flames that American Indians were going to come and catch every fish out of there and wreck the fishing and wreck their economy and wreck everything, which has not happened with the protest at the landings. And I was in high school age around that time. A lot of insults and whatever. It's a darker point in Wisconsin history that occurred in the later 80s, before that finally became law with the United States. So when that law came through, it's called Act 31. It's part of a budget bill, so it's not really a descriptive name whatsoever. We all come to know it as Act 31. Actually passed in 1989, so it's been 32 years that's been the law. And it is that it needs to be taught about in elementary school, middle school, and high school, that the fact that American Indians have those rights to hunt, fish, and gather. There's a little bit more to it, but not a whole lot. And over the years, we've worked on that and educated schools and education programs, universities, and wherever we can kind of get the word out. And it's amazing that here we are 32 years later, and I will still do a presentation at a college with young education students who've been born since 1989. This has been their reality their entire life. And most of them have never heard of it. So it's not really been, enforced.
Yeah.
There's all the teeth behind it's not tied to funding, things like that. So what part of it is, some folks have looked at, and a friend of mine, professor at UW Green Bay, J.P. Leary, wrote a dissertation and a book on it. And really, one of the key points I take out of his work, and it's a great history document. So if you like reading about history, it's the Story of Act 31 by J.P. Leary. And if you don't like history but can't sleep, then you should read that too. I told him that, so I'm not just picking on him. But one of the key points I take away from that is that level of being upset and that racism and the violence and discrimination coming out of that can be viewed as an educational outcome. So we didn't educate our students or Wisconsin citizens or anybody well enough to understand that this is a right that is retained by those nations to do those things. And a right is a right. It's not a privilege. It's not something that I can say you can do it today, you can't do it tomorrow. You have the right to breathe, the right freedom, pursuit of happiness. You have these inalienable rights. And it's the same thing. It's one of those rights. Now, the folks up there don't go in someone else's backyard and pick, the vegetables out of their garden. That's a retained right. Maybe they could do it. I'm sure it would go to court and it probably would not hold up because that's really not a good thing to do. But I don't think they would do that. And it's not part of our Christian values to take every vegetable or take every medicine or kill every fish. And actually what came out of that is the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission that they formed up in northern Wisconsin. The Native Nations banded together and formed that multinational commission. And they've worked to restock the lakes, to put limits on the catches. And I don't keep up on all of the issues and complaints, but I have relatively few violations by Indian folks up there. And then when there's violations, it's usually a non-native person, taking dozens and dozens of extra fish or whatnot. So really never turned out the way the business owners up north thought. We were the ones who are going to kill all the fish, and really it's just always kind of been the other way around, something we've been pointing out for years and years. But there are still people that don't like that harass our fishermen when they're out there. And again, there's strict limits. They got to go out. They know when they're going out, they come back in. They always get checked by our DNR folks as well as the state folks, check all that stuff. Keep real good track of it to know how many to replenish the next year. And I think it was 2 years ago now, somebody got, occasionally there'll be a shot fired from shore towards the boats. And that happened as recent as 2 years ago. So there's still people that are, upset about that, think that the native fishermen are doing something they shouldn't be, all those things. So, we understand history in the long term. So eventually that thinking will go by the wayside at some point if we continue to work on educational outcomes with their upcoming generations.
Yes. And so is Act 31 that had educational requirements that are still on the books, correct? So in the public schools, there should be lessons taking place about those things.
Correct. Exactly correct. There should be. There isn't always. So there's a person who works for the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, David O'Connor, amazing individual, just won some awards for state and national Indian education, doing really great work out of that office. He will come and train anybody's school if they make a request to him. It's not hard to find on the internet. Also, his page, his DPI page has, I don't know, at least dozens of resources on there. Not everything is broken down to a scope and sequence or a resource and a standard.
Right.
Find we try to get the gold standard education, but there's all kinds of stuff on there. Videos for younger kids, older folks, documents, links, all kinds of things. So the resources are out there. What we've run into probably over the last, 6 to 8 years is teachers are noticing, hey, great, thanks for sending me the resources. Thanks for David coming and doing some training, or they get to hook up with one of the CISA zones and do the training with them. It's amazing training, and you feel great and really smart when you come out of it. but it's always like, well, what's the next step? We don't know how to implement this, or not that we don't know how to, but what's, where's that material where I can just put this in my social studies unit and move this forward. But also to give Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction credit in their newer revised social studies standards, they've included tribal, American Indian tribal entities and nations within some of those standards. So it's no
Okay.
longer I can talk about, county government, state government, local municipal government. In there is also tribal government.
Good.
So nice to see that actually included right in there. Again, there's no requirement, right, to do all those things. And we continue to work with the state legislators to get more, just to get more to it, right? Get maybe some teeth to it, so people are required to do it, not so optional. And also to have it taught a little more frequently. Because the stories we've run across for the past, I don't know, number of years, 15 years or whatever that I've been doing this, or longer, our students remember, oh yeah, it was November. We had to go to the library and get a book and do a book report on Indians. So were there certain books? No, it could be any book, anything, or draw a picture of an Indian, or, really perfunctory type assignments that I don't think hold much retention of what it is and what those rights are about, and why it is that we have Native nations in the state of Wisconsin, and what their historical contributions is, as well as contemporary contributions are. I mean, looking into the future. And it's not, we're not extinct. We don't all live in the past. We don't live in teepees. We, we're amongst you. We're all out here. Some of us, professionals in white collar, and some blue collar, and some do all kinds of different kinds of things. Powwow dancing and jazz, whatever. I mean, we're on all walks of life.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, that makes sense to me. And so those basic things are things that all Wisconsinites should know. I think what I've been missing for, and also like for the future part of this, is how to think about big problems that our nation has to solve, that, and with the other nations that were originally here. And what we can learn about Indigenous ways of thinking, for instance, Oneida ways of thinking, ways of problem solving, for environmental justice, and taking care of each other, and some of these bigger issues that America needs to solve. And so what would you tell us about the ways of thinking and problem solving that are traditional and that are still being used in your nation that we could use around the United States?
Yeah, these are all good questions. I'm glad we talked about so many ahead of time, because and again, I mean, I think any presentation I do, any question comes up or any slide I'm able to put up, it really could be a full day talk, or a semester long class, it seems like. So there's lots of things to all this stuff, and different histories and different perspectives and whatnot. So some of it for me is within the language, all the different languages. So really one way to look at various languages is that they each provide a way to view the world. And if we can each have more than one way to view the world, to me, then when there's more opportunities to solve problems, and more perspectives to bear on any kind of an issue, anything we want to accomplish together. We can bring our different perspectives together. If we all think one way, it might really work for some time or for some issues, but not probably as robust to handle everything. And so it is for us. We've been under this great law of peace for a long time, couple thousand years, depending on which version it is that we're looking at. And there was a time, I mean, I guess maybe this has been part of the intro, but the history I understand, and we've always had ups and downs through different times of history. And it's usually out of them dark times that something amazing comes out of that. And then the fact that we're people, we forget to remain amazing. So we drop off and get back to old behaviors, and then kind of go through it again. But there was this time when there was a lot of warfare and abuse was going on. And then this piece was established out of that. It had gone for so long, people really forgot what families were a part of anymore. So it was pretty pretty low period. But out of that came this time of peace, and really it got back to, or actually like abolished warfare. And say even different weapons of war, including how you were thinking about things. If I'm trying to undermine you or work against you, or having that that competitive kind of a mindset, really to harm you and boost myself up, those were weapons of war that were done away with as well. I was really working on having a very clear mind, very good intentions, making sure that you're in a good space for that, to be able to do those things. And to me, one of the premises of that diplomatic work is understanding that we can accomplish much more working together than any one of us can working against each other. So I look at that as some of the foundational, my foundational understanding, and trying to come to any kind of an issue with that mindset. That coupled with a level of respect that is not just Oneida, but other folks talk about this too. And we don't argue about our creation stories. We're not here to argue about our ways of celebrating, our ways of worship or whatnot. And it's actually an acknowledgement that all creation stories can be true. So if someone says, oh no, energy goes clockwise, we understand it goes clockwise here. And I'm like, well, I understand it goes counterclockwise. They can explain their perspective to me, I can explain my perspective to them, and we can understand that. We can respect each other. It's not at the foundation, we're not here to disrespect ourselves, each other, spiritual forces, those kinds of things. Everything's here to help us live, again, live that life as intended. So I think those are some things that I don't want to be, overly judgmental, but I see some of that stuff isn't really part of a lot of conversations that I hear about, or sometimes are brought to me, or someone who wants to help working through something. That is not the place we're usually coming from, right? We try to get to more to that place and understand that there's these different gifts that are kind of blanketed, a little more pan-Indian than specific to some nations. This is really their foundational work. Other of us kind of adopt this or think it's not a bad idea, or maybe a good idea anyway. But they talk about humility, and one thing around humility is you should really seek to understand before seeking to be understood. I think that's not one of like our Oneida core foundational beliefs, but as I hear that, I'm like, well, I remember that. That's kind of how we were as kids. Like you need to understand what's going on before you throw your 2 cents in, or before you say, oh, you got that all wrong, let me straighten you out here. It's taking that presence to sit with that, to understand that before you're going to jump into it. So we talked about before in our little prep time before this talk, that typically, and some of the people that I've learned from, you wouldn't really prepare your talk until you met the people. Like you wouldn't know what they were going to need to hear today. That would be really judgmental and a big presupposition or supposing that I know all these things to tell you what you need to know. I'm glad we're having a conversation based on these topics, because it's hopefully a little more vibrant and more meaningful to the listeners than me just coming and having a PowerPoint ripping through it for 50 minutes and thinking I did an awesome job. So I think to me, those are some of the foundational things that I think occur within our cultures, and I think would be useful things to explore or work on some more to get, like you said, beneficial for everybody. Not that they have to learn a full another language, but just understand that there's other perspectives that are just as valid as the ones that I might hold or you might hold or whatnot.
And on that theme, sort of, we had a comment from the Facebook audience that there's this concept of what you are leaving for the next generations, or they put the number 7 here, the next 7 generations, and that the community included that sort of concept as they were working with the county, trying to preserve county grounds out here in Tosa.
Yeah, I love that. I've heard a couple different ways to take a look at that, and sometimes if we're talking about 7 generations in front of us, 7 generations behind us, some people say it's more like the 3 behind us and 3 in front of us, and we're the 7th one in the middle. So for years we'd say, oh, that's you kids are going to figure this out. This is you're going to take this to the 7 generations, and I see the older people just kind of take a step back as if we're done being part of that link. And it's, to me, it's that way. We're all part of the solutions for these things. And it is trying to be that mindful, that far ahead. And when I was younger, I was like, I can't think about tomorrow yet. I'm still working on today. But then you have kids and you start to think a little bit about one generation. And then I finally had grandkids. It was like, well, now I can start thinking about their grandkids. So you start to see that longer time horizon. In our stories, they said that our people lived to be around 120 years old. So then there you might actually start to see that 5th, 6th, 7th generation in front of you. And I think it's a much more tangible view. And again, with the grandkids, it's like, holy cow. And I start to see, when they get to be an age and have their own kids and whatnot, to me, it really brings it into focus. Like, not necessarily every single little decision I make, but some of the decisions that it really can tip, like, am I helping or am I hurting? Or in the long run, how is this going to be different? And we had an event a while ago, and there was some friction about a group coming in and how are we going to do this and how are we going to do that. And I said, to me, we can be a good host. And I don't know if that's going to play out 7 generations down the road for sure. I don't know if anyone will remember that. Or it can be a bad host. And I'm thinking that's probably going to stick in their minds a lot longer than making a decision to put a smile on and show up and do a good job. And then just some of that's with the hunt, fishing, and gathering too. I think the same teachings fall in there. You would never go out and gather the first one that you find. You wouldn't take the last one that you find. You always make sure that there's something there to continue on. So I think that's oftentimes a little bit different perspective on what we're doing. It's not judgmental about greed or whatnot. It's just this foundational understanding that there always has to be enough that life can propagate, and it's going to be there for our future generations as well. I think that's really, really hard thinking, hard to be that forward thinking, hard to have that level of wisdom, and hard to get a group together that wants to move that way. So obviously you have to work on making agreements and really trying to get that pure intention of, yes, this benefits us today, but how is this going to impact down the road? And it doesn't just stop at 7 generations, because we all continue to think that way. And it's a reminder sometimes too that our ancestors prayed for this life that we have. They prayed for us to build that, for us anyway, continue to have ceremonies, language, education, families, land to be on, and those kinds of things. And we benefit from the decisions that they had made that long time ago, even though some were, really a hard rock and really a hard place, but still how that wisdom went into that to result in the resiliency that we see today. I think that the outcomes are undeniable of that process of considering what's going on. That level of discernment is amazing to me. I appreciate that being brought up in the chat.
Yeah, me too. And so as us non-Indigenous folks want to learn more and also be good neighbors, good allies, you included, and we're gonna hopefully put this in the chat or start putting some of these resources on our Facebook page too. But what are some good things for non-Indigenous folks to do or read or watch that will help us be better neighbors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been looking more at how to be an ally, especially since George Floyd and those kinds of movements were going on. And I think it's amazing to be an ally, to help out, and to do kind of, we're all trying to do our part, right? We're all trying to be good neighbors and be there for each other and move away from some of the things that I guess I grew up believing, right? Go back to educational outcomes, things I learned either through school or through peers or through parents or through the community I grew up in, whatever it was, how that helped me understand the world from that slim perspective. But of course, when you're younger, you think that's the whole perspective. But as you get older, hopefully we can get out and meet more people and do some things to better understand, have, I guess, positive interactions. One piece of research says that, to get out of that mindset, you need to meet and spend time with people of different backgrounds. And I think that's partially true. I know some people of different backgrounds they're not good people. I used to, as a psychologist, I'm not putting anybody in a box, but I've run across some folks that have done some bad things, and some are regretful and want to make changes, and some kind of aren't. So I've been able to do some work, lots of different settings. So I get, rub up against lots of different folks, and I would never want my clinical work or a slice of my clinical work to make me think, oh, that's how all people
Right.
that fit that category, they're all like that, because it's just not true, right? We're all diverse people. All of our backgrounds are very diverse, and all kinds of folks, and no one person or viewpoint represents everybody of any particular group. So I think it's broadening that out and really trying to have positive interactions with folks from different groups, attending public celebrations or public speaking, different events, things that you're invited to. And we talk about this with some friends in education as to kind of what's that metaphorical doorway where one of us leads and one of us follows or steps back a little bit. So it's not that you can't enter that space, but if there's things that you're really not invited to and you find out about it and you run through that doorway and, hey, here I am, I got a college degree, I'm gonna help you out. I'm not picking on college degrees because I have those. But we kind of see that sometimes. Or I lived in the city for a while, which I've been down here for a while in the Milwaukee area, and kind of go back home as if I know everything because I've seen this slice of the world. It's disrespectful, and it's not being a good ally. It's learning to take the lead, and when you're invited in or you're asked a question, to bring your best, bring your answer, and kind of leave it at that. Te Halawa Kashus is my name, my Oneida name. It means he divides the issues. So it's great, and it's also frustrating because I can tell you, oh, on this hand and on that hand and that hand, and then I can split things up more ways than what's useful. So I'm like, I kind of just get a name like he makes really good decisions quickly, because that would be awesome. But for us, our names are it's who you are, it's what you do. And I recall being asked to come to a meeting with some of the leaders, and it became evident they were kind of stuck on an issue, and they asked my opinion. I started going through this way, that way, and then they're like, okay, you can go. And I remember walking out going, I just got started, I got all this other stuff I want to tell you about.
Yeah.
It took a while for me to process that and recognize that they invited me because I'm Te Halawa Kashus. They wanted me to divide an issue, to give some different perspectives, and when they were done with that, they were done. It wasn't disrespectful, it wasn't mean, it wasn't mean-hearted. It was just, that's my role. I've had learned that my role in my community is different than my role somewhere else, probably. So in a medical center, educational setting, I get asked all kinds of things maybe I'm not the best person to answer, but hey, this stuff, so answer for us. Where in a more traditional community, you're asked to do what you're gifted with, and then beyond that, someone else will be asked to fill in what their gift is. So it's again a way to do some of those things. So that as an allyship, part of it is learning authentic information as best as we can judge what that is. And there's a scale of racist, anti-racist, or allyship and whatnot. And I like the scale that I've run across. And I think there's a link on here somewhere, because right in the middle is attending a talk like this. So I love it when audiences come and do things, because it's not like, hey, you're doing it all wrong. It's like, you're doing some really right things. And the next step over is teaching somebody else, or inviting somebody else, getting engagement with somebody else. So you share this talk or talk about this talk with somebody else, you're already moving more along that way as well. There's Kendi's book, that anti-racism, anti-racist, was a different way of looking at that perspective. I think is really, really important. It can be kind of a tough read in some ways. I think it's a great read, but like just the title is hard for some to get past, going, geez, I understand the world. I'm not a racist. Why do I got to read this? But really, I think getting through that stigma of that and understanding what the point is about it, how do we actually actively work to be a good ally, not just on race relations, but really on anything to change our perspective, I think is really good. So a couple of books in here. Patty Lowe, a professor down at Northwestern recently wrote a book about Indian Nations of Wisconsin. Her most recent edition is 2013. A really good foundational book, give you lots of good information in there. Another friend, Anton Troyer, up in Minnesota, Everything You Want to Know About Indians But We're Afraid to Ask, from 2012. Must have been something going on in the 2010s that made these books, motivated to get out there. Of course, Everything You Want to Know is a bit of an overstatement, and it's a shorter book with short very short chapters, maybe a couple paragraphs or a couple pages. So it's a good starter on some questions that some folks have sometimes, and it kind of can guide you to your next step that you might want to Google or research or ask somebody about whatnot. I think anytime you run across somebody have a question, it's always respectful to ask. Don't presume. Lots of folks I know are native. They look the part 100%, or they're out front doing things, but maybe they don't know all this information, and that's
Sure.
perfectly okay. Like I wouldn't just expect to walk across to anybody of a different race and say, hey, you look like somebody that knows all about this particular history, and maybe they don't. So would never want to shame anybody, but to ask, hey, I've got these questions. Are you someone I can ask, or is there someone you can recommend or send me to, or a resource? Usually get a pretty good response. Coming in that humble kind of a manner. Like, hey, this Powless guy said X, Y, and Z, and I think he's full of it. And you'll find some people probably agree with you, no problem, but that's really not a respectful way to ask a question.
Yeah.
And it isn't that I know all these things, and feel free to fact check me on all this stuff, because it's a lot of information to try to put into it one talk.
Yes, exactly. And so I think as we think, about a conversation we've had, it's nice to, as we're processing that, get a little bit from a book and a little bit from a podcast or a legitimate news source that you feel you can trust, and then it builds. So it's good to have all these exposures and experiences. So
yeah, I think so. And again, I mean, there's resources. You'll probably put more things on here, but
yeah,
public library has good or museum has good resources. Public broadcast has videos called The Ways of Every Tribe in Wisconsin, all 12 representatives speak about different issues in there. So really, really good information from some really good people.
Awesome. We're coming to the end here. It went very fast. Anything else you want to add that I didn't get to ask about, or that you didn't get to say?
That's one of my favorite questions, and I don't have an answer prepared for that. I wasn't even really thinking about it. I think as far as the prompts for the questions, I think we pretty much covered things as well as I can, given the time. I keep looking back at that comment from the chat, and just always think about how much everyone else knows about some of the stuff already. So don't think I'm coming here to tell you things that you don't know. And it is that bringing all the minds together to have that peaceful kind of a way, is understanding that there's so much capacity that already exists. I'm sure a lot of your viewers and listeners know bits of this or parts of this, or know someone who knows this or more of what we've been able to talk about today. All those resources, yourselves as resources, just continue to build that capacity and tap into those kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, I would think anybody listening or viewing this probably is, again, the allyship part of it and learning about things are already on that good trajectory. So, take some praise for being on that path, and certainly take encouragement to continue on doing the best you can.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end. So I hope all of our viewers and our future viewers, because we will post this soon, will join me in thanking our guest, Dr. Mark Powless. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with us tonight and sharing your insights, Mark. And then thanks also to the Facebook audience for your time and your interest in tonight's discussion. As always, a special thank you to our generous friends at Bostic, whose support makes this series possible. You'll be able to find a recording of tonight's presentation and all the Tosa Talks presentation on the Tosa Together YouTube channel. Please feel free to reach out to Tosa Together anytime through our Facebook page, our website, or by emailing us directly at tosatogether@gmail.com. So this is Katie Phillips with Tosa Together. It has been my pleasure to be here with our special guest, as well as with all of you. Thanks for being part of Tosa Talks and our mutual effort to build a diverse, thriving community. Good night, everybody.